Hi, I'm Tonti-Filippini. I'm a PhD in philosophy and I teach at the John Paul II Institute, where I teach in bioethics. I'm also a consultant in bioethics to the Australian government. Tonight I'm talking about marriage and the importance of marriage. So the topic I was asked to talk about is marriage just a piece of paper? And I'll be talking about the importance of marriage in terms of being a witness to God's love, as a sacramental marriage, and as a total gift of self from one person to another, and in that way expressing their personalities through that gift of love.
The topic for tonight is on marriage, and the topic is marriage just a piece of paper? Isn't being in love the most important thing? Our purpose in having Dr. Nick discuss this topic tonight is not to hurt people or judge them. It is to discuss a really important issue. What is marriage? Many people today say that this is just a gloss that we put on a loving relationship, like tying a ribbon upon a present. Is this what it is? Certainly that is not what our grandparents believed. Today we would all have family and friends living in de facto relationships. Our purpose here is not to hurt the feelings or judge people in those circumstances, but to learn the truth about marriage, which is even today the cornerstone of our society. The majority of people get married at some stage in their life, and surveys have shown that more than 3/4 of young people still want to get married, so it is very important that we understand what marriage is and what it isn't. Our speaker tonight is Dr. Nick Tonti-Filippini from the John Paul II Institute on Family and Marriage here in Melbourne. He is the Associate Dean of Teacher Learning and Research, and he's Head of Bioethics, and he's also a consultant in bioethics. He's a member of the Australian Health Ethics Committee of the National Health and Medical Research Council and chaired the subcommittees on the unresponsive state and commercialisation of human tissue. And he's the subject coordinator for a number of subjects at the JP2 Institute here in Melbourne. We're privileged to have Dr. Nick here tonight, and without further ado, I'll hand you over to him.
Well, thanks very much for making me welcome, and thanks for being here in such numbers. When I was coming down tonight, I wasn't sure how many to expect, and so it's good to see this is such a popular function. So thanks very much. I hear last week you had Mike Willesee, so maybe that accounts for it rather than for my being here tonight.
Sorry, Dr. Nick, I don't know if they can hear at the back.
Can you hear me at the back? Yeah, no, right. Yeah. I heard a speaker who was asked that, and when somebody up the back said no, he said, well, obviously you can. Okay, I don't really want to lecture you tonight, and I see lots of faces of students who have heard enough of my teaching, and so I would much prefer that we had something of a conversation than just have a straight out talk. So feel free to interrupt me, feel free to raise things that you want to raise about this topic. You know, it's hard to sort of stand here and talk to people and not know you know, what you're thinking and what you'd like to be talking about, so please make it a conversation. And to try and get a conversation going, I bought a few little pictures. I've only bought 20, so if you basically make it one between 3 or thereabouts so you can see them. Thank you. The idea of giving you these images is just to spark some thinking in this area of relationships and so on. And I guess the question, is marriage just a piece of paper, is really a question about not so much about marriage, but a question about entering into relationships or sexually intimate relationships outside of marriage. You know, is marriage necessary? Does marriage make a difference? And it's interesting, you know, in our society where we're finding there are several interesting things about our society at the moment. Only 40% of people who do marry actually marry in the presence of a minister of religion. So we've highly secularised marriage. So in fact, most marriages are not religious marriages, which is an interesting concept. So marriage in our society is mostly not a religious concept, which is an interesting thought. We also know that a very large proportion of people don't get married. And of those people who do get married, they're quite keen on it. They get married several times. So it's become a very interesting concept. And of course, marriage is very important to one group of people, and that's those people who are in same-sex relationships and want the recognition of marriage. And they certainly don't think it's a piece of paper. So, you know, there are lots of interesting kind of conflicts around the idea of marriage and what it means. And I guess the place to start, which is why I've given you those pictures, which are really sort of pictures of some couples, is to spark the thought about the relationship between men and women, which is what marriage is understood to be, a relationship between a man and a woman entered into for life exclusively. And I guess it's why you would do that. Why would you take that step? What are the things that you think ought to be there before you make that step? And why would you bother, so to speak? And I guess those are the sorts of questions that are in mind. And so I guess I'm putting them to you. Or put it another way, how many of you think that at some stage you would marry? Some of you are married, but that you would marry. Why? Why would you choose to marry?
I guess marriage in the Catholic Church is mostly for me because it's a sacrament, not only just being together as a couple, like it's actually a sacrament in the church.
What does a sacrament mean? Why is it important that marriage is a sacrament? As I said, you know, most marriages in Australia are not religious, they're not sacramental, in that sense of sacramental anyway. Why is it important that marriage is a sacrament?
Because, well, as you said, 40% of marriage is not sacramental, and something like the same fail. And I think the reality is we are human and we're weak, and I think it's very hard for marriage to survive without the graces that come from God in a sacramental marriage.
Yeah. What's the purpose of a sacrament, any sacrament? What's its main purpose?
Visible sign
of what?
God's love.
God's love, visible sign of God's love. Well, what's the connection between marriage and being a witness to God's love?
You love your spouse should mirrors the love that God gives us.
Yeah, I mean, Christ used the idea that he was the bridegroom and the church was the bride. So he used the idea that marriage was quite important. Marriage symbolised the relationship between Christ and the church. When we also talk about the concept of the Holy Trinity being a communion of persons. And so we talk about a couple being married, being a communion of persons, and in being a communion of persons, in totally giving each to the other, they, in that way, give witness to the love between the persons of the Trinity. So it's not just the love between God and us, it's the love that God is in being that Trinity of persons. So marriage in being a sacrament gives witness to God's love in those ways. It also gives witness to the love of Christ when he gave himself on the cross. So there are several different images of the relationship between God and God, so to speak, between the persons of the Trinity. There's the relationship between God and us. And then there's the particular role of Christ in giving himself to us. All of those are closely related to marriage.